Something I find really interesting in the brass instrument industry is the concept of stenciling. That is, when a factory or a company takes blueprints of a well-reputed brass instrument, designs their own version off of it that is very similar to or identical to it in specifications, and then generally manufactures it in higher volumes at lower costs, thereby making a similar instrument accessible to a wider market. This is the case for a lot of instruments made overseas in places like the Jinbao factory in China. Jinbao bass trombones, for instance, are known to be based on the King 7B, and their euphoniums have historically been based on the Yamaha YEP 642. My euphonium, the John Packer 247S, which you can check out in the card up in the top right corner, is also a stencil horn, although it's based off of a Sterling euphonium, and it is a very serious instrument, especially for the price. Today on the channel, we're talking about a stenciled trombone, and we're going to see if it lives up to the same standards. How's it going, everybody? It's your host, Sam, here from the Samuel Plays Brass channel. I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you're all doing well. This week, on Scholastic Brass Month, Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, we are tackling all things trombone, namely trombones that you should consider upgrading to if for the past few years you've been playing on something that looks like this, and this school year you think is the time to step up your game. Today's trombone, I think, fits that bill really well. Now, one more thing before we get the ball rolling. If you go on to enjoy this video, please check to make sure that you're actually subscribed to the channel. Unlike the vast majority of my regular viewers, we're coming right up on 15,000 subscribers, which is a huge milestone, but we can't do it without your help, and I would love for you to be part of making history on the Samuel Plays Brass channel. Without any further ado, let's head on over to Clearwater Music and take a look at the Giardinelli by Eastman GTB-10 F attachment tenor trombone. We are live here at Clearwater Music with the Giardinelli by Eastman GTB-10, and now we're going to be taking a look at some of its features. This is a standard large bore symphonic tenor trombone that generally means a bore of 0.547 inches and an 8.5 inch bell flare, just wider than a handspan in my case. This instrument has an open wrap trigger, which means that the F trigger slide extends well above the main tuning slide in standing position, or rather, much farther back in playing position. That can be a hazard, so do be wary of that. We've got a conventional circular rotor here with some very nice engraving on the cap and a very comfortable paddle. But something to note about this particular trigger is it's designed a little bit differently from some in the way that the tubing is configured around the F slide. This is designed a little bit more like a Bach 42BO. Many symphonic tenors will have this tube here come out at an angle like this, perpendicular to the main branch, and it'll kind of circle around and then form a loop. This one squirts straight out of the valve section, actually parallel to the main branch. That is something to consider. The resistance of that is a little bit different than something like, let's say, a Shires or a Getzen valve. Some people prefer this configuration and some people do not, so just be wary of what it is that you're going for. The trigger itself is designed with this nice mechanical linkage. It's not authentic mini ball as far as I can tell, but it's a pretty good imitation of the mini ball system. In any case, it's pretty quick and feels nice in the hands. Even my personal trombone, my Con 88H, is a string linkage, so it's refreshing to play on a mechanical from time to time. I think the response and articulation with the valve is just a little bit more crisp that way. And there are a couple of neat little adjustable features on this instrument. First of all, we see screws on the bell section, and I'll try and take a picture of what that looks like when you dismount the bell. I'd certainly love to have a copper bell or something to mount on this thing, but unfortunately there does not happen to be one in the case. And the other main adjustable feature is this lead pipe, which has some screw knurling on it, which makes me think that you were supposed to take it out and replace it with other lead pipes to dial in the resistance or whatever you lead pipe gurus are after. I'm not smart enough to be one of you. There are no other lead pipes in this case, but you could theoretically find one to fit, especially considering this trombone is stenciled from plenty of other great symphonic tenors and probably could fit their lead pipes. In any case, that is all for the GTB-10. I'll turn it back over to you, Studio Sam. Alrighty, thank you, Shop Sam, for that rundown. Let's talk about how the GTB-10 plays, shall we? In general, trombonists are called to play over a fairly wide range of pitches, and when you test a large bore symphonic tenor trombone, you should be looking to make sure that it has command of and cooperates with you on anything as low as the pedal tones all the way up to the top of your range, at the very least a high B flat or C if you have that in your range, and at best, if you can realistically play it on other trombones, an E flat or F above that. Just because these are notes that you might be called to play as a trombonist, and it's very important, again, to make sure that your trombone will cooperate with you and bring out the best in your playing in those extreme registers. I think the Giardinelli GTB-10 has good command over its, 3.5 or 4 octaves or whatever it was I tested in total. Now, a couple of smaller notes on playability. I, as a trombonist or trombone doubler, like to sometimes put alternate positions to use above the staff. For instance, B flat atop the staff is usually in first position, but I like to play it in fifth position if I'm coming from a note such as a G natural, meaning there'd be less movement than if I went all the way back to first position. That applies to notes like the D above that being in fourth rather than in first, or the F above that being in sharp fourth, a little bit closer rather than first, just because if you're playing like an E flat or something, it's very easy just to go boop for F rather than going all the way back to the first. The trouble is, on the Giardinelli, I noticed that those notes further out on the slide, the alternate positions, were not really as resonant or well-centered as their first position counterparts. I don't think that's a deal breaker for many trombonists, especially, high school age trombonists. Me being a fairly lazy one, I like having access to this stuff and having it feel the same as the first position notes, but they're a little bit squirrely in my opinion. Also, if you're a first-time large bore user when you step up to the GTB-10 and you're used to playing on something like this, King 606, then you might have to retool your approach to the upper register a little bit. Many small bore trombones really like to act as battering rams. Not literally, don't get any ideas there. But what I mean by that is I'll put this horn to my face and I will push for the high notes. I will play them like I am punching through a brick wall, and that is how they'll best come out. I will punch holes through the back wall with the sound of this instrument. The trouble is, that is not such a fruitful endeavor on the Giardinelli. It really does a lot better if you back off of the high notes and allow them to happen rather than force them. I'm also pampered by the fact that my main trombone is a Con 88H, which is very, very strong in the low and trigger and pedal registers, and I noticed that the Giardinelli was not quite as strong as it. It's about on the same level as a Bach 42, which is to say maybe 5-10% less power than a Con 88H down there, so everything speaks realistically pretty well, all the way down to pedal C if you care to go that low. And do keep in mind, the trigger register on this horn performs about as well as you would expect on any circular rotor. Even if the 88H is my preference, I think this rotor performs about as well as you would expect on a typical Bach 42B or 42BO, and that's what it's really meant to do. This isn't some high-class trombone with a Hagman or Thayer or axial flow or true bore type valve with wide sweeping bends in the tubing, seeking to eliminate all sense of resistance from the player's side. For your first trigger trombone, you want something that won't feel drastically different between a 6th position C and a 1st position trigger C, and to that end, I think the GTB-10 does its job just fine. Again, similarly to its close cousin, the Bach 42, the GTB-10 is a lot of fun to work with sound-wise. I mentioned backing off in the upper register and allowing the notes to happen rather than forcing them. If you're able to do that successfully in all registers of the horn, you'll be rewarded with a very soft and sensitive side of its tone that is very pleasing to the ear while still maintaining crispness and clarity. And if you push that sound a little bit more, you get a very bold and regal tone, although if you toe that fortissimo line a little too closely, you start to perhaps border on brittle or distasteful. Do also keep in mind that that's at least partially a me issue, because when I push on trombone, I push very hard, sometimes to the point that the tone is breaking up, and a lot of trombones do that in my hands eventually, so whether it's the Giardinelli or a little bit more me, maybe the jury's still out on that one. Like I've been alluding to, I think the GTB-10 makes for a very solid upgrade instrument to a student's first trigger or large bore or symphonic type tenor trombone. I think it does its job very well in that regard. It has that general large bore trombone sound and plays very similarly in a lot of ways to upper echelon trigger trombones. And so for that reason, it gets the SAM seal of approval. The one thing I would really like to see is interchangeable lead pipes. Unfortunately, I don't know if they come stock with interchangeable pipes because this particular one at Clearwater only has the one, but there are definitely different tapers and lengths of lead pipes that can help you to focus in troublesome low notes, or on the other side of things, help improve projection without turning up the harshness factor in the tone. Now this is crossing into like turbo nerd territory, but seeing as the bell can be dismounted from the instrument, I would really love to see Giardinelli make copper or rose brass or nickel silver bell flares for these instruments. I know it's not super common on trombone, but that really would be a very nice touch. My Con 88H is a copper bell, and that's a huge part of the reason why it doesn't break up on me as easily as some trombones do, because that copper will soak up your high frequencies. Or if you're coming to trombone as like a euphonium or tuba player, then you might want a nickel silver bell to put a little bit more edge or spin on your tone if your tone lacks a certain liveliness. That's something that would be ridiculously cool to see, but obviously I can understand why that's not the company's top priority. Not a lot of trombonists care about stuff like that. Anyway, there's no reason to overcomplicate it. Like I said, this thing plays and sounds and is designed fairly similarly to the greats like the Bach 42, and for that reason, I think it makes a good trombone for section playing in orchestras, wind bands, or anywhere where you would find those other types of trombones. I hope you've enjoyed this review and learned a thing or two in the process. Once again, please make sure that you're actually subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss out on stuff like this, and so that you can be part of making history before we hit 15K. Until next time, we'll see you on the flip side. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to support the creation of bigger and better content on the Samuel Plays Brass channel, have your name featured right here, and a whole host of other perks and benefits, then please consider pledging your support at patreon.com/SamuelPlaysBrass. For now, you can find more videos in the end screen cards to my left.